There was a decade when brands didn't sign cowardly pacts, they signed death sentences. The 1990s were the era when the world's fastest motorcycles were born, without controls, without limits, and without fear. Kawasaki, Honda, Suzuki, and Yamaha entered a silent war to see who would break the speedometer first. Incredible machines that would be completely unthinkable today. But now, we're going to relive the fastest bikes of the 1990s era, when speed was nothing short of pure madness. At the beginning of the 1990s, motorcycling was living a beautiful kind of madness. There were no electronic controls, no limiters, no fear of lawyers. The Japanese brands were in the middle of a Cold War, but at 280 kilometers per hour. It was a time when, if you had a motorcycle, the engineers had only one mission: to make the fastest production motorcycle on the planet. And the pilot, well, he'll have to sort himself out. Number 10. Honda CBR1000F. The ocean liner that ran like a missile. The CBR1000F was a delightful anomaly. A sport touring bike that performed like a big superbike. With its inline four-cylinder engine, 1,000 cubic centimeters, and over 130 horsepower, it didn't explode with a violent kick. It delivered power smoothly and steadily, just what you need for top speed. In practice, that meant that once it got going, it never ran out of breath. It kept pulling where other thousands would run out of steam. Its secret was in its aerodynamics and stability. A wide fairing, long wheelbase, and geometry designed for fast straights made it surprisingly stable at over 250 kilometers per hour. It didn't wobble, it didn't float, it stayed firmly planted. That's why many testers of the time easily clocked 270 to 275 kilometers per hour on the speedometer. And more importantly, it could maintain extremely high cruising speeds for minutes without. The CBR1000F, it was formidable. It accelerated less dramatically than a GSX-R, but it got there just the same, and with less stress. It wasn't the sexiest or the lightest, but on a long straight, it played in the big leagues. It was the starting point. It proved that a 1000 could be truly fast, and on top of that, usable, paving the way for the speed race that would define the 90s. Number 9. Yamaha FZR1000. EXUP, intelligence applied to speed. The FZR1000 EXUP was the bike that proved that smart thinking could be just as effective as adding more horsepower. Yamaha realized before anyone else that the problem with the 1000s at the end of the 80s was not just peak power, but how and when it was delivered. That's why they created the EXUP exhaust, a valve in the exhaust system that regulated the flow of gases according to the RPM, eliminating the classic dead spot at low and mid-range. The result was almost magical. It pulled hard from the bottom, pushed decisively in the mid-range, and when you revved it out, it just kept accelerating like it had no limit. Unlike other 1000cc bikes that were sluggish up to 7,000 RPM and only came alive after that, the FZR was always ready. That made it not just fast, in numbers, but fast in the real world, where overtaking and coming out of corners mattered just as much as top speed. Its top speed was around 275 to 280 kilometers per hour, but what was truly impressive was how it got there. The Delta Box aluminum chassis gave it a stability that other leader bikes didn't have, allowing you to accelerate hard without feeling like the bike was twisting. That wasn't scary, it inspired confidence. And that confidence was dangerous, because it kept pushing you to go faster and faster without warning. Number 8. Suzuki RF900R. The underrated one that was actually fast, the RF900R is one of the great forgotten sins of the 1990s. No one remembers it as the fastest, and that's exactly why it was so. Suzuki put a 937 cubic centimeter four-cylinder engine in it, with solid power, full of torque, and a long pull that didn't run out easily. It didn't explode with violent acceleration, it built up speed, and before you knew it, you were cruising at a pace that other bikes could only reach with a lot of drama. Its strong point was stability, a solid chassis, geometry designed for high speed, and a large fairing that sliced through the wind like a blade. And over 250 kilometers per hour, it didn't fall apart. It didn't float, it didn't twist. It was comfortable, stable, and quiet, perfect for maintaining insane cruising speeds without punishing a rider. That's why in real-world tests, it clocked 270 to 275 kilometers per hour, numbers that put it on par with much more famous bikes. Why did it happen? Did it go unnoticed? Because it didn't have any marketing. It wasn't racing, it didn't come from winning championships, and it didn't look like a dangerous bike. It didn't scream, "I'm fast." It just was, period. On the highway, a lot of GSX-Rs, CBRs, or ZSTRs. They were surprised when the RF kept pushing, while the others were already praying. Number 7. Kawasaki ZZR1100. The very first absolute queen of speed. In 1990, Kawasaki didn't just come out to compete, they came out to shut people up. The ZR1100, ZX11 in some markets, was the first production bike to make top speed a selling point. It wasn't just fast for its segment, it was, plain and simple, the fastest in the world for years. No question about it. The secret was in the whole package. A 4-cylinder engine with 1,052 cubic centimeters, over 145 horsepower, and the famous ram air system that pressurized the intake at high speeds. From a certain point on, the ZZR pushed harder the faster you went, something that in the 1990s sounded like science fiction. There were no sudden surges, just a constant wave. But what was truly terrifying wasn't just how fast it was, but the way it delivered that speed. The ZZR was long, stable, heavy by design, with aerodynamics made for flying low for miles on end. While other superbikes started to float, shake, or cry for help, the ZZR kept going straight, steady, unshakable. At 280 kilometers per hour, it seemed like it was just waking up. While others vibrated, wobbled, or prayed, the ZZR seemed to say, "Is that all you've got?" Its impact was brutal. It forced all the brands to join the speed war. Without the ZZR1100, there would be no Blackbird, no Hayabusa, no ZX-12R. It was the first absolute queen, the one that paved the way and proved that a motorcycle could be fast, stable, and usable all at once. Today, it's pure legend. The bike that ushered in the era when 300 kilometers per hour stopped being a dream and became a real threat. Number 6. Suzuki GSX-R1100, the brute with no nares. The GSX-R1100 was the exact definition of raw, unfiltered power. Suzuki took the GSX-R concept, lightweight, big engine, and zero compromises, and pushed it to the extreme. A 4-cylinder, 1,127 cubic centimeters engine, over 145 horsepower, and ram air since 1993, and a power delivery so violent it seemed endless. On the straight, it was a beast. It accelerated with fury from mid-range revs, and at the top end it kept pushing when others were already begging for mercy. The problem, and the legend, was everything else. The chassis and geometry didn't always match the engine's level. The tires of the time struggled, and at high speeds, the bike demanded strength, faith, and respect. It wasn't inherently unstable by default, but it certainly didn't forgive even the smallest of mistakes. If you applied the acceleration incorrectly, it was only fast because it had such a powerful engine. and dangerous because it left you on your own. The GSX-R1100 was power without asking for permission. If you knew how to handle it, you were king. If not, the hospital. Compared to the ZZR1100 or the FZR1000, the Suzuki was less refined, but also more visceral. It wasn't looking for ocean liner stability or electronic intelligence, which didn't exist. It was after raw sensations. That's why it was the favorite of those who wanted the wildest experience of the 1990s. Today, it's pure legend. A bike that didn't try to take care of you, just make you go very, very fast. Number 5. Honda CBR1000R Fireblade, the most dangerous by design. The CBR1000R Fireblade wasn't dangerous because it was unstable or had serious flaws. It was dangerous because it broke all logic. Up until 1992, superbikes were big, heavy, and muscular. And then Tadao Baba shows up with an idea that was almost reckless for the time. What if we make a 900 that weighs like a 600? The result was a 185-kilo dry-weight bike, compact, narrow, with 122 to 128 horsepower and a power-to-weight ratio that no one was ready to handle. It could reach about. The total distance measured for this specific journey spans approximately 280 kilometers in length, from the starting point to the final destination. Per hour. Faster than your brain could process. That was the real danger. It made you feel invincible. Where a GSX-R1100 was intimidating and a ZZR1100 commanded respect, the Fireblade would just smile at you and take you straight to the limit without warning. The compact chassis, short wheelbase, and extreme agility turned it into a scalpel in the corners. But it was also a twitchy bike. If you didn't have a delicate touch, with no traction control, no anti-wheelie, no ABS, and with tires from the 90s, any mistake would cost you dearly. A lot of accidents weren't caused by too much power, but by too much confidence. That was its real sin. The weight of a 600, the power of 1,000, an idea as brilliant as it was dangerous. Number 4. Honda CBR1000XX Super Blackbird. Elegance created to dethrone Kawasaki, the CBR1100 wasn't born by chance. It was born with a very clear goal: to take away from Kawasaki the title of the world's fastest motorcycle, which in the 90s belonged to the ZZR1100. Honda didn't want to do it with noise or aggression, but with its favorite weapon: cold engineering and surgical precision. The result was a bike that surpassed 290 kilometers per hour, but did it with a calmness that was almost frightening. Its 1,137cc inline four-cylinder engine delivered around 164 horsepower, but what was truly impressive was how it delivered them. The acceleration was continuous, solid, with no surprises. It didn't shove you violently, it pulled you toward the horizon. While the ZZR commanded respect with its presence and power, the Blackbird simply stretched out effortlessly, as if speed cost it nothing. Honda worked obsessively on the aerodynamics. The fairing was fine-tuned in a wind tunnel, so the rider would be protected, even at illegal speeds. At 250, the bike was still stable. At 270, it was still solid. And at 290 kilometers per hour, it seemed like it still had more to give. That was the key difference. It didn't just go faster. It looked better. Where others started to float, it stayed planted like a Japanese bullet train. The The chassis, the long wheelbase, and the high-speed-oriented suspension turned it into a highway devourer. It wasn't a twitchy sport bike, nor an intimidating muscle bike. It was something worse, a bike that didn't warn you about the danger. The speedometer climbed so quickly and with so little drama that many riders found themselves traveling at ridiculous speeds without even realizing it. Pretty Yamaha R1 1998, the compact chaos that broke all the rules. The 1998 R1 wasn't an evolution, it was an explosion. Yamaha looked at the world of superbikes and decided to blow it up from the inside. Up until then, fast bikes were big, long, and relatively stable. And the R1 said, what if we make a 1000 the size of a 600? The final result was remarkably lightweight, featuring a powerful engine that seemed like almost too much for that specific chassis. This impressive 998cc engine delivered around 150 horsepower, but the real trick wasn't just in the raw power, it was actually in how every single component was meticulously packaged together. Yamaha stacked the gearbox to shorten the engine, reduced the wheelbase, and centralized the mass like never before. The result was violent, immediate, almost aggressive acceleration. You twisted the throttle and the world seemed to compress. The front wheel would lift without warning, and the speedometer climbed as if it were broken. And unlike the Blackbird or the ZZR, the R1 wasn't stable by design. It was twitchy, reactive, alive. It didn't have traction control, anti-wheelie, or riding modes. Just your right wrist and your reflexes. At 290 kilometers per hour, the bike demanded absolute concentration. A slight throttle mistake, a sudden correction. And the R1 would remind you it wasn't built to forgive. In fast corners, it was a double-edged sword. If you knew how to handle it, it was devastating. It would enter, turn, and exit with a speed unknown until then. If not, it would spit you off. Many riders came from bigger, calmer bikes, and the R1 would catch them off guard. That's where its reputation was born. It wasn't the fastest in a straight line, but it was definitely the most dangerous because of how easy it made going very, very fast. The R1 forever changed the concept of a superbike. After it, everyone wanted to be more compact, lighter, more extreme. It was the beginning of the modern era of 1000cc sport bikes, a bike that not only hit almost 300 kilometers per hour, but did it with an emotional intensity that left a mark on an entire generation. The R1 didn't just take you fast. It launched you into the future without a seatbelt. Number 2. Yamaha YZF1000R Thunderace. This was Yamaha's last great old-school missile before the R1 changed the game. With a real top speed close to 290 kilometers per hour, it was a bike designed to devour the Autobahn in endless straights with insulting ease. Its 1202cc engine, with about 145 horsepower, delivered massive torque from mid-range and kept pulling furiously at high revs, supported by a chassis inherited from the FCTR series, long and extremely stable. It wasn't trying to be light or playful, it was built to go very fast for a very long time, with such stability that it made many of its rivals seem slow. Unlike the CBR1100XX, the Thunderace had a raw, less refined character. It vibrated more, felt bigger, and demanded respect. But on long straights and sustained acceleration, it could go toe-to-toe with the CBR and even beat it in real-world tests. Its brutal sport touring focus made it comfortable at high speeds, with effective aerodynamic protection and a stability that inspired confidence when the speedometer crept into illegal territory. It didn't have the marketing or the aggressive looks that sold posters, and it arrived just before the R1, which stole all the attention with its revolutionary concept. That's why it was overshone. But time was fair. Today, it's remembered as an underrated beast from the 1990s. A bike that didn't need to shout to intimidate. You cranked open the throttle, and it disappeared instantly from the rearview mirror. In a world before electronics, the Thunderace proved that Yamaha knew exactly how to build incredibly high-performance machines. Stable and fearsome, and before the compact chaos of the R1, it had already mastered the art of serious speed. And in first place, the Suzuki Hayabusa, the one that scared the world. The 1999 Suzuki Hayabusa GSX-R1100. It wasn't just fast. It redefined the meaning of speed in a production motorcycle with a real top speed close to 312 kilometers per hour. It was the fastest bike of the 1990s and the first mass-produced motorcycle to break the psychological 300 barrier, something that until then belonged only to prototypes or extreme custom builds. This motorcycle's impressive 1,299 cubic centimeters engine, which is capable of consistently maintaining high revolutions without faltering, perfectly integrates power, aerodynamics, and stability like no other. It wasn't a lightweight superbike. It was an aerodynamic missile designed to win the long, straight speed war. The Hayabusa was so dominant that it forced a pact among Japanese manufacturers to self-limit the speed of their later models. Not out of fear of losing races, but because of political, media, and safety pressures. Headlines, governments, and insurance companies all reacted to a bike that made all previous competitors look obsolete. While others fought for tenths of a second, the Hayabusa won by knockout. Its teardrop fairing, mocked at first, turned out to be an aerodynamic masterpiece that allowed for sustained acceleration and its impact was cultural. The era of the hyperbike was born, the cult of absolute speed, and the idea that a motorcycle could be faster than almost any car on the street. On the drag strip, on the Autobahn, or in independent tests, the Hayabusa reigned unchallenged until the very pack that stopped it. That's why the phrase stuck. The Hayabusa did not simply win a single race, because when a motorcycle compels the entire industry to come together to halt its dominance, it is no longer merely competing against its rivals. It is competing against the very system itself. The 90s weren't just a decade. They were an open-air experiment. A laboratory with no ethics committee, where brands pushed boundaries without asking for permission. Where speed was an obsession and courage came standard. Bikes were born with character, not with rider aids, with raw power, not with filters, with frames that learned the hard way, and tires that begged for mercy. Fear wasn't a side effect, it was part of the package, a silent warning, every time you twisted the throttle and the horizon compressed. Today, modern motorcycles are significantly more powerful. They handle corners with much greater precision, and they forgive mistakes that used to result in serious consequences, dearly. But they also whisper less in your ear. Back then, every vibration was a message. Every shimmy, a lesson. Every long straight, an intimate pact between you and the machine. There were no maps, no modes, no safety nets. There was throttle, instinct, and respect. The kind of respect you learn when you know there's no net underneath. That's why the 90s can't be replicated. They can't be designed. They can't be homologated. They can't be updated by software. The 90s are lived with scars, with exaggerated stories, and with awkward silences. When someone asks, "How fast were you doing?" Because that was the era when bikes didn't want you to like them. They wanted to test you, and if you survived, they left you with something unforgettable. Because the 90s aren't made, they're survived.